Black Panther is the 18th installment in the ever-expanding Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm kind of losing count at this point, there's been so many films. Directed by Ryan Coogler, the film stars Chadwick Boseman, who reprises his role as T'Challa, aka Black Panther, after his debut in 2016's Captain America Civil War. And going into this movie, I was very excited. I've been wanting to see a Black Panther movie for years. Civil War, that was such a great debut for the character of Black Panther. But he wasn't the main character of that movie, and we didn't really get to see a whole lot of him as a character. It was mainly just there on this revenge quest trying to kill Bucky because he thought Bucky was responsible for the death of his father. But that does very much play into this movie in terms of the fact that it starts off with the recent passing of his father, and so he's now forced to take up the mantle of the throne of king. And the film very much explores the fact that T'Challa is this, you know, heir to the throne who has to step up and take up the mantle of king now in the wake of his father's death. And that's basically how this movie opens and what the film is really about. It's about T'Challa coming into his own now as a person, as a warrior, as a king, and taking up the mantle and taking up the throne. And straight off the top here, I'm just going to say it, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I think this is one of the best, if not the best film Marvel has ever done. That might sound like hyperbole, that might sound like I'm just overhyping or overrating this movie. Trust me, I'm not, because before I saw this film, a lot of people were kind of really hyping this film, and I was worried that people were kind of just overpraising it. Black Panther is the most groundbreaking, revolutionary film ever made. You know, it's an absolute game changer. Like, really? Is it really that different? Is it really that groundbreaking or that revolutionary? But after seeing the movie, yeah, I kind of agree with what everyone has been saying. I think this was a spectacular film, and I knew I was going to like this movie. I knew I was going to enjoy it, but I didn't think I was going to like it as much as I did. I really do honestly think this is one of the best films Marvel's ever done. Now, I don't want to be too hasty because Civil War and Winter Soldier for me are the best films Marvel's ever done. They're currently my top two favourite Marvel movies, but Black Panther is definitely up there. I've only seen it once, I'm not sure at the moment whether I put it as my #1 favourite Marvel movie, but it's definitely in the top 3 at least. And the reason why I think Black Panther was such a good film was because it was more than just a great superhero movie. It was more than just a great Marvel movie, because Marvel's made so many great movies. I like everything Marvel's ever done, to varying degrees. Obviously, some films they've done have just been, you know, alright. Some films they've done have been absolutely fantastic. But even though Marvel has made so many great movies and so many great superhero films, the big difference with Black Panther is that it's not just a great comic book movie. It's not just a great Marvel movie. It's a great film in general. And that for me is how I distinguish the best superhero films of all time from just, you know, great superhero movies. Because the best superhero films for me are the ones that are more than just great superhero movies. They're great films in general. If you strip away the superhero elements, that's how I feel about Winter Soldier and Civil War, is that they're so great that if you take away all the superhero elements, you take away the powers, the action scenes, they're still great films. They would still hold up as great films in their own right. And the exact same thing applies to Black Panther, as does, say, like the Dark Knight trilogy. And all the best superhero films for me are the superhero movies that, like I said, they're just great films in general that just happen to be about superheroes, you know, but happen to be about characters who have superpowers. And that's what made Black Panther so great, because as awesome as all the kind of superhero kind of action sequences are in this movie, and trust me, there's so many great action sequences in this film, as great as all the superhero stuff is, you take away all of that, you look past all of that, you strip back all of that stuff, and it still holds up as a great film from a character and narrative standpoint. And that was, for me, what really pushed Black Panther up to being like one of the best superhero films I think we've had in recent years, and definitely one of the best films Marvel has ever done, because it was so much more than just a good superhero movie. It was a fantastic film in general. And one of the best things about this film were the characters, because in a lot of superhero movies the characters are great fun to watch, they're really cool, they're really awesome, but they're not a whole lot more than that. In this film, they're not only really cool, awesome characters, but they feel like real people. Literally all of the characters in this film, regardless of the varying amounts of screen time they have, each of the characters in this film feel 100% fully fleshed out and developed. Every character in this movie felt like a real person. Of course, this is very much T'Challa's film. He is the lead protagonist. It is about his story and his journey, but not only is T'Challa a really well written character, portrayed fantastically by Chadwick Boseman once again, who brings that gravitas and that kind of majesty and that kind of regality to it, where when you're watching him on screen it feels like he was just born to play that role. I can't imagine anyone else being Black Panther. He just has that majestic, regal quality to him. He has that kind of gravitas and that kind of power and that kind of presence, because Black Panther isn't like, you know, Tony Stark or Thor or any of these other characters. He isn't about that, the kind of the talking or the humour or the banter or anything like that. He is a very kind of serious, straight-laced character, but Chadwick Boseman just has that presence and he has that power and that intensity where just his presence on screen alone just speaks volumes. He's just such a great actor and he really brought it in the role of Black Panther. But like I said, everyone, it's hard to, I can't really talk about everyone in this review because it will just go on for like 3 hours, but everybody in the cast was so great, to the point where they could carry a movie in their own right. Danai Gurira as Okoye was great, the general of the Dora Milaje kind of all-female force of women warriors. She was great. She was such a badass in this film. Lupita Nyong'o, she was really great in the movie as well. And also Get Out's Daniel Kaluuya is in this movie, and I thought going into this movie he was just going to have a small throwaway little bit part really, but he actually had a lot more to do than I was expecting. You know, he didn't have a massive part in the movie, he's not one of the main characters or anything, but he did actually have a much bigger role to play than I was expecting. He did actually have a lot more to do than I thought he was going to, and he was really great. But, of course, talking about the supporting cast here, talking about the characters in this movie, I've got to mention Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger, and a lot of people have been talking about him being one of the best villains Marvel's ever done, one of the best villains of any comic book movie we've ever seen, and I would not disagree with that. And the reason why Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger is such a great villain, because he's actually not in the film a whole lot. When you finish watching the movie and you look back on it, you realise, oh yeah, he actually wasn't actually in as much of the film as you maybe thought he was, because Michael B. Jordan's character is so well written and you can connect with him so much on such a deep level, you forget until you look back on the film that he actually wasn't in a lot of the film. But the reason why his character works so well is that you can understand where he's coming from, but that is not the only thing, because there's a lot of great villains out there, and for me the best villains are the ones where you can understand where they're coming from. You don't condone their actions, and they're undeniably evil, but at the same time you can understand why they would think in that certain way, and you can understand why they're doing what they're doing, and that most definitely applies to Killmonger. But beyond that, not only are we able to understand where he's coming from, but we can almost sympathise with him. In many ways, Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger is almost like the hero of this movie. I mean, he's not, you know, T'Challa is the protagonist, he's the hero, but in many ways Killmonger is kind of a hero as well. It's almost like there's two heroes in this movie. There's not a hero and a villain. There's not one pure good guy and one pure evil guy. Like, a lot of the characters in this movie operate in a kind of grey area. There's a lot of kind of shades of grey to a lot of the characters in this movie, and that's what made it so much more realistic than a lot of superhero movies, is that there's not just pure good-hearted angelic characters and pure evil characters. The protagonists are flawed and, you know, have conflicts and struggles they're dealing with. And also the villains have a lot of humanity to them. Because Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger isn't just an evil guy who's doing evil things for the sake of it. Because a lot of bad guys, and a lot of the Marvel movies actually, the villains are very underwhelming and very lackluster, because they're just bad guys who are doing bad things just for the sake of doing bad things. And they just come up to do evil things and that's it. But with Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger, and what Ryan Coogler did with this film and the part that he wrote and he gave to Michael B. Jordan, is that he was not a throwaway character. He was an extremely important, pivotal character, and he had so much depth to him. And we could really not only understand where he was coming from, but we could really relate to his character. We could really feel everything he was going through just as much as T'Challa, because there's some very emotional moments that T'Challa is dealing with and grappling with in terms of the relationship that he had with his father, but also with Killmonger as well. You know, there's just as much depth and emotion and humanity to the villain as there is to the hero. And that's what made this movie so riveting to watch, especially when good and evil clashes, because it's not just good and evil, it's two different sides with two opposing points of view, very much like a kind of a Professor X or Magneto kind of thing. It's not just one's good and one's evil, it's just, no, there's just two sides with two different points of view, and we have these two characters here in T'Challa and Killmonger. They both want what they think is right for Wakanda, and they both want to do the right thing for their country, but they're both completely different characters that are coming at this situation from two completely different opposing points of view, where we got T'Challa, who was raised and nurtured in this isolated, secluded kingdom of Wakanda, and then Killmonger, who was raised in the US, you know, so he has a very different outlook on life and a very different viewpoint from T'Challa. But we can see where both of these characters are coming from, and we can relate and almost sympathise with both characters, so it makes it so much more thrilling when the good guys and the bad guys are fighting, because it's not like we're just rooting for one side. We can understand where everyone's coming from, and it makes the fight sequences in this movie, especially the final battle, so thrilling to watch unfold, because we're just so invested, because we care about these characters so much, and because the characters feel so much like real people. We're so much more invested than we normally would be in any other superhero movie where it's a little bit more surface level. Because there's so much depth to the characters in this film, we are so much more invested, and we are so much more engaged when these big crazy action sequences are going down, and that's what I thought was done so well with the characters in this movie. But also, one other major point that really jumped out to me in terms of why I thought this was one of the best Marvel movies is that I have gotten emotional at Marvel films before, with the Captain America, Bucky stuff in like the Winter Soldier and Civil War, but for me, this is by far Marvel's most powerful, personal and emotional film, because this wasn't just a great big fun comic book action movie. It was a very personal, very deep, heartfelt, emotional story that I could really relate to, and it really resonated with me on a really quite powerful, deep and profound level. Everything that T'Challa's going through with, you know, struggling to deal with the loss of his father, and it's not that he doesn't feel ready to be king, he just doesn't feel ready to move on from not having his father in his life anymore. That was actually a big part of this movie, everything in terms of the relationship that T'Challa had with his father, and it's very much about the relationship between a father and son, this movie. It's very much about family, and that's why I found this movie so powerful and so emotional. It's really at its core about family, and that's why I think this film is going to resonate and really kind of appeal to a universal audience, because it's powerful themes that we can all relate to, you know, in terms of family, in terms of the relationship between a father and son. That's what really set this movie apart from all of Marvel's other movies, is that for me this was by far the most powerful, emotional film they've ever done. It had so much more emotional depth, and I could get so much more invested, and it hit me and resonated with me so much more powerfully than any other film Marvel's ever done, because it was so emotional. Also, this film looked absolutely fantastic. It was shot by Oscar-nominated cinematographer Rachel Morrison, and there were so many shots in this movie that had such striking visual imagery. It really felt like an Oscar movie at times because of how well this movie was shot and how striking some of the images were in this movie. It was such a powerful film from a visual standpoint as well. So striking, so powerful, and like I said, there were so many moments in this movie where I was looking at it and thinking, that looks like a shot from like an Oscar movie or something. It was so well done. The score I thought was great as well. A lot of people have been hyping the soundtrack, and the music in this film was really great and really woven seamlessly into this film, but the score was great. It was a really great, powerful musical score that had some kind of African tribal elements to it, and it was just a very powerful orchestral score that really enhanced the images on screen, and the balance between score and soundtrack was done beautifully. I was worried the soundtrack was going to feel kind of off and out of place, but no, the music was interwoven so seamlessly into this film and balanced so beautifully with the orchestral musical score. It was just pitch perfect. Another thing in this film I have to talk about is Wakanda. Obviously, a large majority of this film takes place in Wakanda. It's the home nation of Black Panther. He's the king of this country, essentially, and what I really loved about this movie is that it really made it feel like Wakanda was a real place, and it really felt like a country as well, because Wakanda, it's not a small little place, it's not a city, it's a country. There's multiple different tribes and vast amounts of different people from different tribes across the country, and that was a really cool element, and I loved how they did that, because there was a danger going into this movie that Wakanda could have felt a little cheap or a little kind of shortchanged, but they nailed it with Wakanda. I loved the look and design of Wakanda. I loved the feel of Wakanda. As I said, it very much felt like a country. It very much felt like a real place that I could go to. And I just could not have been happier with how well Wakanda was presented in this movie. I don't know how Ryan Coogler balanced it all, because there was a danger that this movie could have felt overstuffed and overloaded, because there's so many different elements here. So many things that he's juggling in this movie. But he was able to balance all these different elements, all these vast, disparate elements together in such a beautiful and harmonious way, where it never once felt overstuffed or overloaded. It very much felt like this was a singular vision from an auteur filmmaker, whilst at the same time being this big, bombastic, action-packed Marvel movie. And that's what's so great about Marvel and Marvel Studios, that they're able to give chances to these smaller, up-and-coming directors who they know have got the talent and are able to put it off, who are master storytellers, great filmmakers. Yes, it's this big, fun, awesome, action-packed Marvel movie, but it's a very personal, emotional film from Ryan Coogler at the same time. I completely agree with everyone who's calling this film a game changer and just groundbreaking and revolutionary, because obviously it's the first major movie to have a predominantly black cast, but as well as being such a game changer in terms of representation and diversity of the characters we're seeing on screen, it was also groundbreaking, I feel, in terms of it being a superhero movie that felt so much more than just a regular by-the-numbers superhero movie. It is a great, fun, awesome, action-packed superhero blockbuster, but what makes this so different is that it's a superhero movie that feels so much more real and so much more grounded, and it's embedded with so many real world themes and issues that are put across so naturally and organically into the story, because there was a danger that it could have had social commentary and could have had political subtext that felt a little forced on the nose, but it just works so well because it makes sense for who these characters are and the world of the film and what's actually going on in the story. It's natural and organic to the story in terms of what these characters are dealing with, that the social commentary just works. It fits so well, and it is so powerful, and it is so relevant to kind of what's going on in the world today. Even though this is a fictional kind of comic book movie, there's so many elements that are touched upon in this movie thematically where we sit back and we're left to think, how are these same issues at play within our world? And those are the best kind of genre movies for me. The ones that are not only awesome, fun, action-packed movies, but the ones that feel very real, very grounded, very much like a reflection of our world. They feel very relevant to what's going on in the world today, but it works naturally and organically in the movie. It works within the context of the story, and because of that, it's so much more powerful, because yes, it is this fictional fantasy film, but with the social commentary there as well, it adds so much more layers to it, adds so much more depth to it than it would have ordinarily. And it's something that, as I said, it doesn't feel forced. It just works so naturally and it fits so well. And yeah, that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on Black Panther. There's a whole lot of other things I could talk about. There was so much I loved about this film, and I'm not fanboying here. I honestly, genuinely believe this is one of the best films Marvel's ever done, and I don't have any major criticisms of it. A lot of people are talking about maybe the CGI. I thought the CGI was great. I was worried about the CGI going in, but for me the CGI was kind of flawless. There was not anything that took me out of the film. There's a moment toward the beginning of the movie where there's a fight scene in the dark that was maybe at times a little hard to see, but that was kind of it. On the most part, I thought this film was absolutely fantastic, from directing, writing, cinematography, acting. Literally, for me, everything across the board was just jaw-droppingly amazing. It sounds like I'm overhyping this film. It sounds like I'm just going on and on about how amazing this movie is. And if you haven't seen the movie, you probably don't believe me. I don't know if everyone's going to feel the same, but I think this is one of the best films Marvel's ever done, because it's a superhero movie that doesn't necessarily feel like a superhero movie. It feels so much more real. It feels so much more grounded, and it also is so much more powerful and emotional than any other film I think Marvel's ever done. This is a film that completely and utterly floored me. I thought it was just absolutely fantastic. So overall, I'm going to give Black Panther a very well deserved 5 stars. There we have it. That wraps up my review of Black Panther. Have you seen the film yet? And if so, what do you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, if you like this and you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to see more. And if you missed my last review, be sure to go and click over here to catch up on my last review, or perhaps down here to catch up on all my recent videos. But with that said, I've been David O'Sullivan. I'll see you next time.